In Chapter 16 of Mounts, we begin to think about the present active indicative. In Chapter 15, we notice the basic components of the verb, and I'll draw your attention here to the three elements that we noticed in Chapter 15: the stem, the connecting vowel, and the personal ending that corresponds to a particular tense form. Now, we are beginning with the present in Mounts, as many grammars do, and we do so because the present tense form is the tense form that is the lexical form or the dictionary form. I noted in Chapter 15 that Greek verbs, as many other inflected languages, provide a level of specificity that is unique. Well, the more specific, the more forms that a verb can have, the more options those who compile a dictionary would have for arranging those verbs, and you'd have to start somewhere. You'd have to find one of those and be consistent so that people learning that language could look up words and locate them more efficiently. And the lexicons that are the most prominent, and including the one in the back of Mounts, but Bauer, Arndt, Gingrich, and Danker, or BDAG, as you'll hear it referred to later in the course, the most basic biblical lexicon, uses the present tense form to locate verbs. So that's why we begin with the present and not another form. I'm going to this discussion just a bit, and we'll come back to it in a few chapters. But there's another tense form called the aorist, and its form is more often based upon the stem of the word or the root. And so when we begin noticing all the patterns of verbs, the aorist is sort of the trunk, and the present is a branch. That may be a little bit confusing. Some students ask, well, why not just start with the aorist? This is a question that I remember having at the end of my first year of Greek. Why did we begin with the present when the aorist is actually the trunk of the tree, if you will, and everything else branches off of it because it is the closest to the stem meaning? The answer is because we not only are learning grammar, we are also learning meaning of words. Therefore, using the dictionary, and we begin with the present. This will become clear as we go, and I'll do my best to help you to make the distinction between a particular word in its various tense forms and the aorist tense form, which most often has the exact correspondent with the stem. Well, let's think about the stem for just a moment. It has the most basic element of a verb, and it carries the meaning. Its basic designation is found right here. And there can be a number of nuances, and those nuances are provided by voice and mood and personal endings. All the specificity that a Greek verb or inflected verb can offer, but the stem is the stem, and that's where we find the meaning. The connecting vowel. Here we have our first beginning of nuance of meaning, and we need to memorize something. And it corresponds with the idea of a personal ending, and we'll get to those in just a moment. If the personal ending begins in a mu or a nu, the letter that looks like M, or the letter that looks like a V, but it's actually a nu, and it carries the sound of N, an N, then omicron is the connecting vowel. And that's most often the first singular and the first and third plural. Otherwise, epsilon looks a bit like an E in English, is the connecting vowel. If no personal ending, omicron or epsilon might be the connecting vowel. So keep in mind, mu or nu, then you're going to have omicron as the connecting vowel. Finally, personal endings, and we'll discuss these even in more specificity in just a moment. But the personal endings are key to knowing what the author intends with the specific verb. They identify the specific person and number of the subject related to that verb. If it's first, second, or third person, if it's singular or plural. These personal endings need to be understood even more clearly. There are, we'll see in a few moments, 4 quadrants of personal endings. The active or middle and passive voice, and the primary or secondary endings based upon primary or secondary tense forms. You'll notice this in Mounce's book, and we will have a slide here in just a moment that bears this out. For now, here is a table that you need to become familiar with, and we will see many of these in the next few weeks. The paradigm of the present active indicative. You see there on the left column, first, second, third singular, first, second, third plural. So if you go to the translation, I, you singular, he, she, it, we, you all, or second plural, and third plural, they. Notice the connecting vowel pattern I mentioned earlier. Omicron for the endings of mu and nu in first and third plural. And then if you'll notice first singular, there is no personal ending, so that has an omicron, and it lengthens then to an omega for luo. Go to the second singular, lues. The connecting vowel is epsilon because it's not mu or nu in the personal ending, it's a sigma. So lues, you are loosing. Lue, he, she, or it is loosing or releasing, freeing. All those nuances can be a part of lu. First plural, luomen. Why the omicron connecting vowel? Because the personal ending begins with a mu. Go to third plural, luusen. The personal ending begins with a nu, and that's why the omicron. Look at that for just a moment. The nu there that looks like a V, but it's again the letter nu, it drops out. And then you have loose and the movable nu at the end of the word. So loosen. They are loosing. We'll come back to this paradigm and others for the imperfect, the aorist, the future, all of the various tense forms. Well, let's do a bit of parsing practice here. You'll notice this in the workbook assignment for Chapter 16, parsing. Parsing just means locating or identifying that particular word in relation to all of the nuances that that word encodes. So it's identifying the person, the number, the tense form, the voice, the mood, and then the lexical form. So luomen is first person, and it's the first plural, so it's we. It's in the present tense form. It's active. We are loosing. And it's in the indicative mood as opposed to the imperative or subjunctive or infinitive. And we'll talk about those in the weeks ahead. Lues, second person singular, present active indicative of luo. So we have luomen and lues. And we'll practice our parsing in each session where we have new components of words, and you'll do a good bit of this in your workbook exercises as well. Well, this is another chart that you'll see several times, the Master Personal Ending Chart. You'll notice this in Mounce's book, and I mentioned earlier there are 4 quadrants to this chart. They are along the axes of active and middle and passive voice on the left, and then on the columns, the first column primary and the second column secondary. The present tense form that we are looking at here in chapter 16 is a primary tense form. And it's the active voice that we've been thinking about today in chapter 16, the present active indicative. The present is a primary tense form and active, and so we have this set of endings, and these will need to be memorized. There's no ending in the first singular, second singular the sigma, third singular the iota, first plural men, second plural te, third plural nsi, and remember the nu drops out. When I look at this and how I have memorized it, I just use luo as the basic idea and think of o, ace a, just putting in the endings themselves, oase a, amen ete usen. Oase, amen ete usen. And you'll want to memorize those endings, and they generally stay consistent. There's a nuance or two along the way, but you'll want to memorize those as we go. Each chapter of Mounce for the next several weeks will have vocab, and I want to get you started with some vocab. This is a chart that you can make on your own, and this kind of a chart helps students to know the words for themselves. And you'll notice the second column has the word bridge. We begin with the lexical form. This is just right out of Mounce, the first word this week, akuo. And the bridge there is something that I have used over time to help me memorize a number of different words in various languages. And the bridge here, akuo, I think of acoustics. The definition of akuo is I hear, and then I write that lexical form out. I would suggest that you hand compose some charts like this, 8.5 by 11, turn it landscape, and make many of these, perhaps photocopy them, and then don't use a computer, but just write in the lexical form and come up with a bridge that can help you to remember the definition. Blepo, for instance. When I hear blepo or see it, I think of blip. Well, blip is something I might see, a blip on the radar, so to speak. Blepo, blip, I see. Echo, the lexical form on the left, the third word for the week, echo. Echo means I have. When I hear echo there, I think of an echo that one would audibly hear. And if you speak in a cave or something, I have an echo. I echo, I have that when I speak. I have is the definition. These bridges may seem a bit odd to you, and that's fine. In fact, I encourage you to make some odd connections for yourself. In fact, sometimes it's the case that the more particular, even the most weird idea that you can come up with will help you to memorize what that word means. Over time, you'll forget what the bridge is because you just know what the word is, but this can help along the way.